You ever step outside expecting a calm, quiet morning and instead find a full-blown wedding erupting in your backyard? Because that's exactly what happened to me. I'd barely gotten 3 sips into my Saturday coffee when I realized my dock, the one I built, maintain, and legally own, had turned into someone else's event space. At first I thought maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me, but nope. There it was. A giant white canopy halfway raised, pastel balloons fluttering in the breeze, and folding chairs multiplying across the planks like weeds. The scent of lake water had been completely drowned out by floral arrangements and whatever perfume those catering staff were wearing. And just when I was processing that, a golf cart pulled up stacked with champagne buckets, a 2-tier cake, and a guy in a vest yelling into a walkie-talkie. I stood there, still in my pajama pants and slippers, trying to make sense of the chaos. The only logical thought in my head was, what in the actual hell is going on down there? Now I'd lived on that lake for almost 20 years, bought the property with a busted dock and spent 2 summers fixing it up. Reinforced the beams, replaced every board, even added solar lights and a bench at the end where I'd drink my coffee and feed the ducks. It was my sanctuary, not community property, not a neighborhood clubhouse. Mine. So when I saw a wedding setup that clearly cost more than my truck sprawled across it, my heart rate hit a level it hadn't seen since my last argument with the DMV. And at the center of it all, there she was, Karen. The reason every peaceful moment in this neighborhood comes with an expiration date. Clipboard in hand, hair teased like it was trying to escape her head, sunglasses perched on top like a crown. The kind of woman who speaks in HOA bylaws and treats property lines like suggestions. She wasn't just attending the wedding. She was running it, directing traffic like a battlefield general, pointing at tables, yelling at the DJ, and giving off the kind of smug energy that could power a Tesla for a week. Karen and I, we had history, not the good kind. I'd managed to dodge most of her crusades over the years. Her crusade to ban unsightly lawn ornaments, her vendetta against anyone who left their trash bin out 10 minutes too long, her attempts to make porch swings a nuisance structure. She once gave me a citation because my garden hose was not wound in a visually pleasing manner. That's not even a joke. That's an actual quote from her little pink violation slips. And I had dodged all of it. I kept to myself. Didn't attend HOA meetings. Didn't respond to her passive-aggressive newsletters that started with, "Dear valued resident," and ended with, "You're doing everything wrong." But this was different. This wasn't her putting up a sign about parking or chasing kids off her lawn. This was her taking over my dock without permission, like it belonged to the community, or worse, to her. I walked down the path toward the water, heart pounding, trying to keep my cool. The closer I got, the more surreal it all felt. People in cocktail dresses were laughing, taking selfies, sipping mimosas. A guy in suspenders carried in a crate of monogrammed party favors. And the dock, my dock, was groaning under the weight of tables, chairs, a full buffet setup, and a speaker system that probably violated a few decibel laws. I stepped onto the wood, which had always creaked under my weight alone, and now felt like it was seconds from collapsing into the lake. Karen spotted me instantly, like she had some sixth sense for trouble. "Oh, Hank," she said, her voice honeyed with condescension. "Don't worry, we'll clean up everything after. It's just for a few hours, my niece's wedding. Isn't it gorgeous?" She spread her arms like she was unveiling the Mona Lisa. I stopped in my tracks. "Karen, this is private property. You don't have permission. You didn't even ask." She blinked like I'd just said something in a foreign language. "Oh, come on, Hank. Don't be difficult. We're all neighbors here. This is about love, family, community." And with that, she pulled out a flyer from her clipboard and held it out like it was a police badge, a wedding invitation, with a flower print border and gold script font. I took it, stared at it, then looked up at her. "This is not a permit," I said slowly. "This doesn't give you the right to turn my dock into a wedding venue." She rolled her eyes like I was the one being unreasonable. "The HOA approved it." I asked to see that approval. She pointed to the invitation again. "It's implied." I nearly laughed. "Karen, I'm telling you, again, take it down, now." But she was already turning away, yelling at a caterer to rotate the shrimp platter and ordering a kid with a camera to get a better angle of the flower arch. It was like I didn't even exist. And maybe that was the worst part. Not just the trespassing, not just the arrogance, but the fact that she genuinely believed this dock, my dock, was hers to use. That she didn't need permission. That rules didn't apply to her. That the ends, her niece's Instagram-worthy wedding, justified whatever means she wanted. I stood there for a few seconds, watching it all unfold. The soft clink of champagne glasses, the rustle of silk dresses. My fishing chair moved to the side like it was clutter. Karen had taken my dock and repurposed it like she was flipping furniture on a home makeover show. I didn't yell. I didn't cause a scene. I just turned around and walked back up the hill to my porch. Because Karen had made one mistake. One tiny oversight that would come back to bite her and the entire wedding party, in the most poetic way imaginable. She didn't know what I'd done to the dock over the winter, and by the time she found out, it'd be way too late. Karen thought she had won. That smug little nod she gave me as I walked back up to my house said it all, like she had checkmated me, like her clipboard was some kind of magical shield that made all rules bend to her will. But what she didn't know, and what made this whole thing even sweeter, was that she had just thrown her niece's wedding onto the one piece of property I'd spent all winter modifying, like a mad scientist in a tool shed. You see, while most folks around the lake were worrying about frozen pipes or planning spring gardens, I was crawling under my dock with wrenches, pliers, and a very specific goal: make it temporarily detachable. Not because I had some grand prank in mind, at least not originally, but because I needed to replace some rotting support beams without dragging in a barge or shutting down half the shoreline. So I installed a quick release mechanism, simple lever, a couple of guiding rails, and a hinge system I could reset by myself. Completely functional, totally discreet. I even tested it a few times, floating the dock out just far enough to make sure I could reattach it later. The whole thing took 10 minutes if you knew what you were doing, 10 minutes to set it free. So I sat in my boathouse for a moment, looked out the window at the pastel nightmare Karen had orchestrated, and then calmly reached down and flipped the lever. There wasn't even a dramatic sound, just a dull metallic click, like locking a gate or closing a toolbox. The release was done. Then I walked back to the house, grabbed my lemonade, and settled into my porch chair like I was about to watch a fireworks show. And oh, it didn't disappoint. At first, nothing happened. The dock sat there like it always had, steady and stoic, playing host to 100 overdressed strangers who had no idea the floor beneath their feet was no longer attached to land. The ceremony had just begun. The groom, nervous, fidgety, probably wondering why he agreed to marry into Karen's bloodline, was standing at the end of the dock, hands trembling as he waited for the bride. The bridesmaids were lined up, fixing their hair and laughing like everything was perfect. Karen stood proudly to the side, arms folded, clearly congratulating herself on another community conquest. Then came the groan. It started low. A long, drawn-out wooden moan like the dock itself had suddenly decided it didn't want to be involved. The plank shifted, just slightly. The flower girl wobbled. Nobody noticed. Not yet. It wasn't until the space between the shore and the dock grew wide enough to see daylight between them that the guests began to murmur. The bride, halfway down the aisle, froze in place. The music stuttered. A champagne glass tipped and fell, rolling off a table and into the lake with a quiet splash. Then someone screamed, "It's moving!" And just like that, the panic spread like wildfire. People jumped to their feet, chairs clattered to the side, and the DJ's table skidded forward as the dock, no longer tethered to anything, began its slow, steady drift into the middle of the lake. Karen rushed to the edge and looked down like she could command the water to stop moving. She grabbed the megaphone and shouted, "Everyone remain calm!" But no one was listening. The dock was floating. The entire wedding, cake, guests, floral arrangements, sound system, was now officially adrift. One of the speakers toppled over and sank straight to the bottom. The bride shrieked and clutched her veil as it whipped sideways in the wind. The groom tried to act casual, like maybe this was all part of the plan, but his face had gone ghost white. A child cried. A woman dropped her mimosa and screamed at someone to grab the shrimp tray. It was like watching a luxury cruise ship realize halfway through the voyage that no one brought an anchor. And then came the internet. You know how every big disaster has someone in the background holding a phone sideways, narrating like they're auditioning for reality TV? Well, Karen's big floating fiasco had about a dozen of them. Teens, parents, even someone's grandma, apparently live streaming the whole mess to a Facebook group called Lake Life Drama. Within minutes, comments were flying in. Is this a horror movie or a rom-com? Karen's dock of doom. I paid for a wedding, got a raft ride instead. Someone even started a GoFundMe to buy the groom a paddle. I sat there sipping my lemonade, watching the likes and laughs stack up like poker chips. Karen, completely unaware, was still trying to take control. She barked orders at a couple of teenagers holding serving trays like they were lifeboats. "Start moving the buffet away from the edge," she yelled, like that would help. Then two HOA volunteers, guys I recognized as her usual loyal lapdogs, launched themselves into a paddle boat from a neighbor's beach. Their plan, apparently, was to chase the dock and somehow tow it back manually. What actually happened was they spun in circles for 5 minutes, while one of them yelled at the other for not paddling in sync. Meanwhile, the dock continued drifting, picking up just enough speed to make it clear this was no longer salvageable without an actual rescue. Someone tried throwing a rope. It landed in the water. Someone else attempted to anchor the corner of the dock using a folding chair and sheer optimism. That chair now belongs to the fish. And then, just when I thought it couldn't get better, Karen noticed she was being filmed. Her whole demeanor shifted. She straightened her blouse, tilted her sunglasses like a movie star, and grabbed the busted DJ microphone. Through the distorted speakers, her voice boomed, "Thank you for joining us for this one-of-a-kind floating lake ceremony. We are thrilled to bring this magical moment to Lake Meredith." I choked on my lemonade. She was trying to spin it. The whole disaster, the uncontrolled drifting, the soaked electronics, the screaming guests. And she was acting like it was all intentional, like she'd planned the first amphibious wedding in neighborhood history. Behind her, a kid was trying to fish a Barbie shoe out of the water with a fork, while a bridesmaid screamed that her heels were stuck between the planks. Karen just kept smiling, waving like she was on a parade float instead of a runaway dock. It was surreal. The comments on the live stream doubled. Floating into her next bad decision. Karen, Queen of the Lake. Someone cue the Titanic music. And the cherry on top? A local news chopper appeared overhead. Someone must have sent the live stream link to the station, because suddenly the sky was filled with rotor noise, and a booming voice echoed from the helicopter speaker. "We are live over Lake Meredith, where what appears to be a floating wedding is underway." Karen looked up at the sky, frozen. Then she did what only Karen would do. She turned to the camera, smiled like a politician caught mid-scandal, and started thanking guests for attending the most unique ceremony the HOA has ever seen. The bride, by now barefoot and crying into soggy tissues, looked ready to swim to shore. The groom just leaned on the railing, staring into the lake like he was hoping to be swallowed whole. From my porch, it was perfect. Absolutely perfect. No yelling, no confrontation. Just a quiet little click in the boathouse, and the greatest wedding meltdown the neighborhood had ever seen. The very next morning, like clockwork, Karen called an emergency HOA meeting. I knew it was coming. She wasn't the type to let something like public humiliation float quietly into the distance. No, she was going to try and claw her way back into control, even if she had to drag the entire neighborhood through a swamp of bureaucratic nonsense to do it. The message hit the community app at 6:03 a.m. Bold text, all caps, with her favorite phrase right up top. Urgent notice to all residents. She claimed the meeting was to discuss safety violations and unauthorized activity regarding the community's shared spaces, which of course was her little way of pretending the dock had always been public. Never mind the property lines. Never mind the private ownership. In Karen's world, what was mine had always been negotiable, and what was hers was sacred. The meeting was scheduled for that evening at the recreation center, the same place we usually held bingo night or book club. But tonight, the atmosphere buzzed with tension, the kind of low-level static you feel before a thunderstorm. Word of the floating wedding had already spread like gossip at a church potluck. Everyone knew. The video had been shared, commented on, remixed, and memed beyond repair. Karen walked into that room wearing a white blouse so stiff it could have stood on its own, pearl necklace gleaming, heels clicking like a metronome of judgment. She went straight to the podium, adjusted the mic like she was about to deliver a campaign speech, and scanned the room like a general surveying the troops. "Thank you all for coming," she said, tone sharp, but trying to sound composed. "As many of you know, there was an unfortunate incident yesterday involving the use of a dock during a community event. We are here tonight to get to the bottom of what happened and ensure that such a disruption never occurs again." That word, disruption, nearly made me laugh out loud. The woman had trespassed, hosted a full-blown wedding on private property, and set an entire social media frenzy in motion. But she wanted to talk about disruption. I raised my hand. She ignored me. I raised it higher. Still nothing. So I spoke. "Actually, Karen," I said, nice and loud, "I gave you a very clear warning. Told you the dock was private. Told you it wasn't secured. You ignored me." Heads turned. A few murmurs spread across the room. Paul, one of the board members, leaned forward slightly in his chair like he was preparing for whatever came next. Karen narrowed her eyes. "The situation," she began slowly, "was misrepresented by social media. The full context," but she didn't get to finish. A woman near the front piped up. "I was there. I nearly fell into the lake trying to grab my purse. You didn't ask anyone if it was safe." Another voice from the back added, "My wife got sick from the food." It sat in the sun for hours. More voices joined in. Frustration, pent up over years of Karen's control, was finally boiling over. You could see it in the way people leaned forward, nodding, whispering, eyes narrowing with every word she said. Paul stood up. He wasn't the loud type. Retired firefighter, level-headed, didn't speak unless he had something worth saying. But when he rose, the room got quiet. "Karen," he said, "you've overstepped before, but this was beyond anything we've dealt with. You endangered people. You dismissed property rights. You acted like this whole community was your playground." Karen's face twitched. Her fingers tightened around the edges of the podium. "You're all missing the bigger picture," she said, voice climbing with each word. "I was trying to create something beautiful, a memory. This neighborhood needs unity." Paul didn't flinch. "Number, what it needs is respect and boundaries. And a leader who doesn't think president means queen. The room fell into a hush. A moment later, someone, maybe Mark from the corner lot, stood up and said, "I'd like to make a motion to vote on her removal." Immediate second. Karen objected, of course, claimed it wasn't valid, not enough notice, not part of the agenda. But the board overruled her. A vote would be held the following week. The meeting adjourned with a buzz of conversation and a dozen side glances in Karen's direction. She left first, storming out with her heels echoing down the hallway, sunglasses on, even though the sun had long since gone down. The next morning I paid a visit to my lawyer. I wasn't interested in petty revenge. I just wanted the line drawn, legally, clearly, without any room for interpretation. His office was across town in a converted farmhouse that smelled like cedar and coffee. I handed him a flash drive with everything on it: video clips, audio, timestamps, full documentation of Karen's trespassing, her giving orders, her mocking my warning, and her bragging about how the HOA always backs her no matter what. My lawyer reviewed it in silence, nodded once and said, "We'll start with a cease and desist. If she so much as breathes near that dock again without permission, we'll escalate." Fast. That afternoon a letter was couriered straight to her door. Legal letterhead, bold language, no wiggle room. I didn't hear a word from her that day, but across the street I saw her standing at her window, holding the envelope like it was a live grenade, eyes locked on my porch with a stare that could sour milk. 2 days later, she showed up at my door with a tray of overpriced cupcakes and the fakest smile I've ever seen. I didn't even open the door all the way, just enough to speak through the gap. She said she wanted to apologize for the misunderstanding. Said it with a sugary tone that made my teeth ache. I accepted the apology. Then I laid down the law. "Step on my dock again without permission," I said, "and I'll have you charged with trespassing. This time, I won't wait for the HOA to catch up." Her smile twitched, and I could see the Karen underneath, barely held together by frosting and passive aggression. She placed the cupcake box on the porch like it was some kind of peace offering, turned on her heel, and walked away, heels cracking against the pavement like punctuation marks in a war story. I waited until she was gone, then tossed the whole box straight into the trash. Not because I don't like cupcakes, but because I know a bribe when I see one. And because Karen? She doesn't lose quietly. She retreats, regroups, and comes back swinging. But this time, I was ready for round 2. After the cupcakes hit the trash, and Karen disappeared back into whatever lair she retreats to when her schemes fall apart, things were suspiciously quiet. For a few days, it felt like the neighborhood was holding its breath, waiting for whatever stunt she was cooking up next. But nothing came. No passive-aggressive emails. No HOA memos about upcoming policy clarifications. No surprise visits to inspect fence heights or hedge angles. Just silence. And for a moment, I wondered if maybe, just maybe, the cease and desist had done its job. Maybe she had finally learned. Maybe I'd wake up one morning and find a "for sale" sign in her yard, and the clouds would part and birds would sing and the lake would stay peaceful forever. But that's not who Karen is. I found out she wasn't done the way you find out about a coming storm. Not from the rain, but from the air changing. One morning, just after sunrise, a county utility truck pulled into my driveway. I was on my second cup of coffee, halfway through organizing my tool shed, when a shiny black SUV pulled up right behind it. And out stepped Karen, wearing a smug grin, sunglasses perched back on her head like a tiara, and a clipboard that seemed surgically attached to her hand. She walked up with the kind of energy you'd expect from someone about to unveil a grand trap. "Good morning, Hank," she said, syrupy sweet. "This gentleman is here to conduct an official county inspection of your dock. We received a report of potential environmental violations." My eyebrows went up so high I swear they almost joined my hairline. A report? I asked. From who? She smiled with her teeth, but not her eyes. The HOA received an anonymous tip. Out of concern for our lake's ecosystem, we thought it best to escalate it to the proper authorities. Just being proactive. The inspector looked vaguely uncomfortable, clearly aware he was being used as a pawn. He introduced himself as Alan, started asking questions about permits and repair history and environmental impact. I kept my tone even, polite, factual. Walked him through every modification, every repair, every permit I'd pulled over the years. I showed him the documentation, receipts, engineering notes, photos. I even offered him a copy of the environmental assessment I'd paid for when I originally added the floating pontoons. Karen hovered nearby like a crow at a picnic, waiting for something to go wrong. But nothing did. After an hour, Alan handed me a signed form, said everything checked out. You're fully compliant. Nicest doc I've seen all week, to be honest. I thanked him, shook his hand, and watched him walk back to his truck. Karen's smile had gone stiff, brittle, like she'd been chewing lemons all morning. Well, she said tightly, I suppose that settles that. I grinned. Sure does. But next time you send someone to harass me, maybe make sure the paperwork's not airtight. She turned without another word, heels clicking like gunshots, and disappeared into her SUV. But that wasn't the only surprise that week. A few days later, a folder of leaked emails showed up in the inboxes of several HOA members. Nobody knew for sure who leaked them, though I had a pretty solid guess. The emails were damning. Threads between Karen and her little HOA inner circle, planning the wedding in advance. One email had her instructing someone to prep the dock at dawn before Hank notices. Another showed her asking for help to temporarily disable my security system, using, and I quote, that Wi-Fi jammer Dave used on his neighbor's cameras last summer. There it was in writing, the deception, the manipulation, the premeditated trespassing. Karen wasn't just caught, she was exposed in black and white, with timestamps and signatures, and her usual passive-aggressive flair. When word got out, the neighborhood lost it. People were livid, not just at the floating wedding or the trespassing or the attempted sabotage of my cameras, but because it was all so typical of her. She'd been steamrolling people for years with her fake authority and her weaponized bylaws. But this time, she'd pushed it too far. The next HOA board meeting was packed, not like the usual half-dozen regulars. This time, every chair was filled. People lined the walls. Some stood in the back, arms crossed, whispering angrily. Karen tried to control the meeting, but nobody was listening. Paul stood up, printed copies of the emails in hand, and began reading aloud. Karen sat there stone-faced, no rebuttal, no excuses. And when the vote came to remove her as president, it wasn't even close. 3 for removal. 2 abstained. Not a single vote in her favor. She gathered her things slowly, quietly, and left the room without a word. For the first time in years, she didn't have the last say. The neighborhood felt lighter the next morning, like some invisible weight had been lifted. People waved more. Kids played outside without Karen yelling at them to keep off the sidewalk. I even got a pie left on my porch from someone I barely knew, with a note that read, "Thanks for standing your ground." It felt good. It felt earned, but it still wasn't over. The very next day, a for sale sign popped up on Karen's lawn like a white flag. It was beautiful. Rumors flew around about why she was leaving, embarrassment, pressure from higher-ups, some kind of personal fallout. I didn't care. All I knew was she was leaving. And the kicker, the Department of Environmental Protection showed up to investigate a complaint. Not about me, but about the wedding. Apparently, someone had reported potential damage to the lake bed caused by improperly secured generators and spilled fuel. The DEP reviewed the footage, took samples, and traced the event permit back to its listed organizer, Karen. They fined her over $6,000 for environmental impact. I didn't even lift a finger. It was nature's revenge. She left before the weekend, packed up in a hurry, no goodbye party, no dramatic last stand. Just a moving truck and silence. Her house sold 2 weeks later to a retired couple named Bill and Marlene. Sweetest people you'll ever meet. Bill likes fishing. Marlene reads mystery novels on the porch. They brought over a basket of vegetables from their garden to introduce themselves. Told me they were just happy to be in such a peaceful neighborhood. I nearly choked on my tea. I told them they'd arrived at exactly the right time. With Karen gone, I finally rebuilt the dock the way I'd always wanted. Bigger, stronger, reinforced. Floating pontoons added for stability, solar lights, fresh sealant, even added a bench swing at the end, perfect for sunset coffee. A few neighbors helped with the project, and we laughed the whole time, retelling the story of the floating wedding. Someone even made a sign that now hangs proudly at the entrance to the dock. Private dock. Trespassers will be drifted. Every time I see it, I smile. And then came the Freedom Float. Not an official HOA event, just a celebration the Lake Committee put together. Boats, floating lanterns, barbecue, music, laughter. Paul personally asked if we could launch the lanterns from my dock. I said yes, on one condition. Nobody gets married on it this time. He laughed, nodded, and agreed. That evening, as the sun dipped low, dozens of glowing lanterns floated across the lake, bobbing gently in the water, their light reflecting off the surface like stars. Everyone was there, laughing, smiling, breathing easier. And I sat back in my chair, the golden paddle someone gave me, spray-painted and labeled Best Dock Defense, resting against my leg. I watched those lanterns float out into the darkness, thinking about Karen, wondering where she ended up. Wherever it was, I hoped the dock was bolted tight. Because one thing was certain. She'd try again. Somewhere. Somehow. But here, her reign was over. And for the first time in a long time, the lake was finally mine again. Peaceful, quiet, and just the way it should be.